Let's forget my PowerPoint and let me tell you a story. I am a North Carolina product. You cannot get more North Carolina than me, just listen. My voice is a North Carolina voice. I was trained in your schools. From the time I started first grade, because we didn't have kindergarten back then, I have been going to North Carolina schools. I graduated from North Carolina universities. I got my additional degrees, one of them at a private school just because it was close. And then I got my final degree, my EDS, at Appalachian State. But the fact of the matter is, I'm yours. I am a product of who you made me. I taught for 20 years, and I absolutely believed I was going to be a teacher my whole life because that's what I was called to do. And I still am. The fact is, though, in about 1980-something, absolutely everything went just bonkers in Raleigh. And they started this standardized testing stuff. And they were testing my U.S. history kids. And I read that first test and I thought, you are kidding me. This is what my children are supposed to know? That's not what I was teaching. And so I had my first encounter with alignment. I didn't understand what it was because, you see, my principal protected me from everything that happened in Raleigh or in Washington. I had no clue. But I taught for the 20 years, and then I had gone back to school to get my administrative degree. Got my administrative degree and couldn't get a job in Gaston County where I had taught 20 years. Couldn't get an administrative job because you know why? I taught AP. And nobody was qualified to teach AP and take my place. So I didn't get to be an administrator. So I went Gaston County. It's right down here, right? Right there's York County in South Carolina. I had taught 20 years in North Carolina. Leave your retirement. Just go on down to South Carolina and get your little administrative experience. And there I met Terry Holliday. He hired me to be his assistant principal at Fort Mill High School. The next 25 years, he was my mentor. We worked together in Transylvania County, well, at the high school, but then we had split up. And he came to North Carolina and Transylvania, but he brought me back. The lie was something about, don't you need to work on your North Carolina retirement? So I came and spent time with him in Transylvania, then he went to Iredell Statesville. And during the time in Iredell Statesville, this is why you came to hear me today. I learned about the Baldrige criteria for performance excellence. And in that process, becoming a national examiner and then a state examiner, I found out through examining healthcare institutions that there are processes in schools. And it is the processes that must be working well if you're going to get the results you hope for. I had to do all that other stuff to get that learning. We educators have a real hard time when you talk to us about being a business, but we are. When you take anywhere from 35 to 85% of a state's budget, it's a business. So how do we organize ourselves well enough to get the results we need to be sure that all of the data that we've been talking about across this whole day, how can that happen? And then how can you consistently make that happen? After I retired in 2008 from Iredell Statesville Schools, I was chief academic officer by that time. And when I left, I said, never again, I am done. Do not call me for any reason. And 2 years later, Dr. Holliday had become Commissioner of Education in Kentucky. It is a hired position there, not elected. And he said, Denise and I are coming to North Carolina. Why don't you meet me at Lake Lure and let's just have a little lunch and let's just talk. And I thought, how cool. I'm going to find out what they're doing in Kentucky, and isn't this going to be great? So, and it was free lunch. So we are out on this beautiful place overlooking Lake Lure. And Denise Holliday says to me at the very beginning, she says, just tell him no. Just tell him that you're retired. Just tell him you're not going to do this. But here's what he said to me. What would it take for you to turn around the lowest performing high schools in Eastern Kentucky? So we're talking academically. I figured he wanted some ideas. And so I said, well, I would need a team of 3 people. I would need somebody to coach the principal. I would need somebody to coach literacy. I would need somebody to coach mathematics. And I need about $1 million so that we could do a lot of professional development just in time when we need it. And that team of people would have to stay in that school until we got it right, until we organized the school in such a fashion that it could get the results that it wanted to get. And he said, okay, that $1 million, is it okay if it's federal money? And I said, I don't care where the money comes from. It's federal money. We're not going to pay people with it. We're going to purchase service with it. So in other words, that's one of our problems with grants, right? They run out and then you can't continue the program. What we wanted to do was build sustainability, and that's why I'm here too. We've written a book about it because from the Kentucky Education Reform Act of 1990 until this year, Kentucky has had consistent legislation, and that's helpful. That was much of what I was going to talk to you about. Their legislatures have had all kinds of combinations of Democrats and Republicans, but Kira did such a good job of defining what they wanted for kids and what processes had to be consistently right in Kira, that every revision, they just rename stuff. Same stuff, they just rename it. Okay, anybody that's got a little bit of wisdom can read that and say, oh, that's how we're going to do support, but that's how we're going to do something else. So prior to my going in 2011, you can tell I'm not going to tell you that how he convinced me I went. But I said I'll stay 3 years. That's it. And promise me I don't have to go to the State Department. Just let me work with the schools. Let us just get that work done. The short of it is one of the schools was so ready for organization of systems, and that's what we're talking about. Management systems. That's what it is. They were so ready for it. They had all the component parts. Like they had a principal who knew absolutely the daily life of every special ed kid in his building. And he talked to them every day about where they were in their goals. That's kind of cool people there doing this work, but they just weren't organized to get the kind of results that they wanted. So one school was ready. They went from bottom 10% of proficiency in Eastern Kentucky. Bottom 10% in 15 months, they were in the top 10%. You tell me that can't happen. It happened. I saw it and I lived it. Because all they needed was some organization about how we do stuff. When you take the data from this group right here, and you say, and I was in Iredell Statesville when this happened, when we started our first pre-assessment, we got the data back and started talking to the teachers, and they said, well, these 25 children just aren't ready to start school. Let's just have them stay out a year. What? That's not what that means at all. We had to begin the conversation then with teachers at that school where all of those kids were going, is so we know this, what do we do differently? And so that's the way the conversation happens. By having systems management theory, looking at the core systems that you have for delivery, how do you take a report like Ann Maddock gave you today in any given school, and how does your school use that report? What are the steps or protocols for taking whatever it is that's coming to you? People, we start over too much. We start over too much. If you talk to the average classroom teacher today, they're just saying, I got 25 years to go, or I've got 5 years to go. I love my kids, but this drives me crazy. Why? Because they don't understand the value of their work to the organization. So how do you do that? Well, part of it is that you don't change everything. You realize which system it is that this thing is coming to, and then you put it through your system. I talked to your 8 regional contact
Case managers.
Yeah, those people. I talked to them last week, and we had this conversation about that. How do you organize in such a fashion that everybody knows in the state of North Carolina what exactly you're going to do, how it's coming to you? And that is, I'm leaving you today with 2 pieces of advice. One is, get a singular, aligned message out of here, out of Raleigh. Everybody talking the same stuff with the same data, with the same voice, and it has to be aligned. The stuff that happens in, you can buy a book if you want to, Without Trumpets is its short name. It costs $30 on Amazon. I've got 6 copies with me tomorrow. First 6 people that say, I want it, you can have it. I do that simply because, yes, my time's running out.
Apparently, that is enough.
Time. Okay, this one's better. But what I have told them is you align the work. If you understand your system so well, who's the leader of your system, what's the mission of your system, etc., if they align behind your strategic plan, the one that you wrote, and they said they are responsible for goal 2. If they're responsible for goal 2, what's their mission behind goal 2? What are the tasks and the responsibilities behind that? And then communicate that. In Kentucky, what has happened, and the reason I tell you sustainability works, Kelly Foster, who is my co-author of the book, is the associate commissioner. I told you I wasn't going to Frankfurt to be a district anybody, right? That was part of the deal. 11 months in, I had to go to Frankfurt, and the reason was to align the State Department. That was my job. I went there, and he said, you just need to get all these 7 departments lined up. And so I thought, well, I got 15 months left on my 3-year commitment or whatever it was, and then I'll just quit after that. But I realized that alignment can happen. And once you align the work, then they continue to do the work through 3 commissioners, 3 in 10 years. Through 3 commissioners, through a total revamping of the board. This board was, that they have now currently, 11 people appointed by the governor. The person who's in charge of post-secondary education, and the guy who's the secretary of the workforce cabinet. That's what their board looks like. The board was totally replaced by this governor to push charter schools. They have charter legislation, but no schools yet, because they didn't get funding. So they were certain that that was going to be the drive. Kelly Foster, when she found out that was happening to her board, started to look for work, and I said, you're crazy. You can prove that sustainability can happen. And she's doing it. This past month, she presented to her board, and her board, this same one that was chosen for the very purpose to get money out of the legislature for charter schools, their first #1 priority for funding is Kelly Foster's CSI program. Now, you tell me that can't be done in this day and time, and I'm telling you it's happening in Kentucky. Now, have they got the kind of results they want? No. Heavens, you know, they had to go from bottom to top. But the fact of the matter is they've got systems that are being consistent. And here's another evidence I'll give you. Under ESSA, outside groups can be employed to come and intervene in a school, right? I mean, that's part of the legislation. So they were thinking that this would be another really good way, this new board, of getting for-profit providers into Kentucky. Guess what? Absolutely no school has asked for an external provider. They only want what the Kentucky Department of Education is providing. That model, because it has grown over 10 years, they know what it is, they know what's coming, it just gets adjusted for the new language. Systems is what I'm about. Systems is what the book is about. The systems in a school have been the same since my grandmother was a teacher in a one-room schoolhouse in Randolph County, North Carolina in 1915. She had to teach those kids. She had to be sure that they had food. She had to be sure that they got the curriculum. And she had to teach whoever showed up. The work has become way more complex, but what if we had just been getting better since 1919 or 1917? What if every year we had just looked at our system and said, child nutrition, you know, it's not okay that most of our kids come to school hungry. It's not okay. What if, and Julie Pittman's from my community, and she taught my nieces and nephews, which is a cool thing. So I didn't really know her before today. But all of that simply is to say that no matter where you are, what you are thinking, or what you are doing, if you had the idea that you were going to continuously get better instead of start over, where would we be? My favorite example, in 1971, the first year that I taught school, we had 2 faculty meetings about tardies. Couldn't get teenagers to class for any reason. They just were lollygagging out in the hall. See, I told you I was a North Carolina person. So they were just fussing out in the halls, and so we had 2 faculty meetings to straighten out the tardy thing. Now, I am from a generation that put man on the moon, invented personal computing and streaming music and everything else, and we can't get teenagers to class even today. 100 years from my grandmother, 50 years from my beginning teaching almost, and we still have at least 2 faculty meetings a year about tardies. Why? Because we don't have continuous improvement systems. That we don't take the work that you guys are doing every single day, those of you who are practitioners, look at it and say, okay, why don't we just twist this a little bit? The suggestion co-chair Buxton had a while ago about the summer programs. Look to see what's working. Do that. If it's not working, then change that. And it's not going to be a statewide answer. The creativity and the answers are local. Leslie County High School turned itself around in 15 months. They have a totally new accountability system, 5 stars. You can guess what that means, right? Do you want to be a 1 or a 5? 5, absolutely. Everybody wants to be the top. Okay, Leslie County is not any richer than it was before. It still is old, dead, cold country in eastern Kentucky. But they started out in the new rigorous accountability system at 3. I think that's a big deal. That's about continuous improvement. It's not about start and stop. It's not about just dealing with the bubble kids. It's about figuring out how are we going to work so efficiently that we get the results we want. So from my time, I would just simply say, processes and protocols work. Looking at individual systems work. In the state of Kentucky, they have a state department that understands that they all have to work together, and if they don't and they're unaligned, then they're confusing the people out there. So, I'm just asking you to think different. You don't have to vote a single thing off of anything I say. But what I can promise you, that I wouldn't be standing here at my level 7. You know, I say that now because I'm 70, right? But a level 7 just sounds so much better. The only reason I'm still kicking is because I know this works. I saw it work. I saw it work at the school level. I saw it work at the state level. I even told legislators in Kentucky when my boss couldn't show up. I thought I'd die, but I didn't. When I had to report to the Education Committee about what I believed was happening in Eastern Kentucky. And we just needed a little bit more money. We got it. So I'm telling you today, it can happen. But you've got to have a clear, aligned message. Your improvement plan, your strategic plan is awesome. If you're able to execute that strategic plan, and everybody in the agency understands it, and everybody who is receiving is a recipient of it understands it, then the next thing you got to do is talk to the people in the legislature as you are doing it. What I told Kelly when she had all kinds of, Kelly Foster, when she had all kinds of changes around her, a new governor, new board, everything, I said, just keep your head down, do the work, and then tell the story of the children who are getting accepted at Harvard for the first time. So I say that to say they're going to just shut us down. You have a huge job, but it is doable. And you can't give up just because somebody makes you mad.